Jonna Bianco is the president and chairwoman of the American Bondholders Foundation. Today we will discuss the fact that essentially China owes U.S. bondholders around $1.7 trillion from the 1900s and has never paid back a penny, although the U.S. has been paying $72 million in interest payments to China for our debt daily. Jonna and the organization are trying to compel the administration to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for their debt. Jonna, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
I want to start off by saying I'm extremely disappointed that it seems like the Chinese Communist Party, along with the seated Democrats that are now in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and almost 80, going back 50 or 60 years, are having their way with our country right now. Your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. It is very in your face, very evident. China needs to be held accountable, and these people need to be held accountable that's supposed to be representing the interests of the American people, not China.
I wonder how it's even possible to hold them accountable when they've succeeded basically in convincing more than half the country that Biden is their guy.
Well, Biden is their guy. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that's why I call him hashtag Beijing Biden. I mean, look, in 2011, Beijing Biden went to China and he cut a deal with them under the Obama administration. They get preferential treatment on our markets, our capital markets. They don't have to abide by the same rules. The Democrats, as well as many Republicans, run blockade for the pro-China lobby out there so that nothing is said negative about them. That is the rule of the Chinese Communist Party, and it must stop. It must end. America first.
Well, how does it stop when you've got to think that the Chinese Communist Party have really infiltrated the Democrats? And as you say, some Republicans, and through proxy or directly, they've been acquiring wealth for decades thanks to the Chinese Communist Party.
Oh, it's very simple. Look, this isn't a complicated issue. The Chinese Communist Party and their propaganda, using the Democrats and some Republicans who put out there of, oh my gosh, don't yank the dragon's tail. They're financing our economy. They hold so many of our treasuries. We're so in debt to them. That is just absolutely false on its face. It is not true. The Chinese Communist Party and China in general owes more to the American people than what the American people owe to China. And at the end of the day, the simplicity of this is U.S. dollars. You stop the flow of U.S. dollars to the Chinese Communist Party. You force them to pay their defaulted sovereign debt, which is over $1.6 trillion owed to the American people right now in 46 states that's holding identical to a U.S. Treasury, except these were issued by China, sold through the New York markets. You make them pay that debt, and you cut their companies off of U.S. capital markets, stop the flow of the U.S. dollar. They can't function. They cannot continue to build up their military base in the South China Seas illegally. They can't continue to go around the world using U.S. dollars that we as American people and American rogue businesses, so anxious to get in bed with the Chinese, use that money to buy allies around the world from corrupt politicians. It needs to stop. You cut the dollars, you cut them off at the knees.
I believe that President Trump began to do that as soon as he got into office, bringing jobs back to this country and taking the Chinese on in the trade wars. And at some point, and he was winning, absolutely winning all the way across the board. And at some point, I'm going to say in January, early January during the Chinese New Year, the Chinese said, you know what? This has got to stop, and here's how we're going to do it. We're going to level the playing field and introduce a virus to the rest of the world. And I didn't think the Chinese Communist Party was that evil. I didn't think that they had the chutzpah to go ahead and unleash this virus, knowing that perhaps it would be too much for our president, and it would really level the playing field, and look where we're at today.
I couldn't agree more. Look, there is no doubt this was intentional. They couldn't beat Trump. Trump was winning. We were bringing manufacturing back. We were creating American jobs. Our economy was booming, better than ever in the history of this country. And the only way to control that was via this virus, this Wuhan virus, which we know came from China. China could have stopped it. They didn't stop it, and it was intentional to directly affect our economy, costing trillions of dollars, the lives of the American people, and those around the world. So it wasn't enough that China has sold trillions of dollars of intellectual property. It wasn't enough of their forced technology, their unbelievable human rights violations. That wasn't enough. They had to stop Trump because Trump was exposing them for who they really are and what their intentions are, not only towards the American people, but to the global world itself.
And on top of that, I have to feel that the riots we've seen were instigated and funded in some part by the Chinese Communist Party, but I can't prove it. I can't draw any connections to that. It's pure speculation on my part.
Oh, there's no speculation. You just haven't looked in the right place. I mean, that's the reason we shut down their embassy in Texas, because we knew that they were funding the riots, they were funding the propaganda, and a lot of the upheaval that we see in society today.
You and I feel like we're speaking to the choir. We're talking to only deplorables here. How do we breach that? How do we get to the other side? One of the reasons I haven't spoken up about this in a few weeks, because I did quite a bit, is because I don't know what the way out is for us. Maybe you can enlighten us.
There's a fantastic way out, and it's one that we presented to President Trump. And I'm here to tell you, it's going to be the next shoe that drops. And you're going to see a lot of congressional support, bipartisan. Despite politics, the American people come first. And what we're going to see, and what we have proposed, is that the bonds that Americans hold in this country be used to pay China the treasuries that they hold. Right now, we are sending $72 million a day in interest alone to China off of Chinese-held U.S. treasuries. That is taxpayers' money, $72 million a day. Can you imagine what that $72 million a day could do for Americans who are suffering, who have lost their jobs, who are losing their homes, who can't take care of their families because of who? China and their Wuhan virus. So you bring in these bonds that 20,000 families hold in 46 states, which is what we've recommended to the Trump administration. And the law, Congress approved in the law to utilize these bonds to basically pay China with their very own paper. They paid the same bonds to Great Britain in 1987, but no U.S. administration until President Trump came along has held China accountable. So it's very simplistic. Eliminate that $1.1 trillion that China holds, take away that stronghold, and utilize those hundreds of billions of dollars back into the U.S. economy.
The Democrats control Congress. They don't want that deal.
Why do they not want that deal? It's better for their people. And furthermore, it doesn't require congressional approval. It's already been approved by Congress. It's already in law. The Treasury Secretary has the authority by direction of the president. So it's not required to have a vote in Congress, the House or the Senate. But I can tell you that in the 19 years as representing the American Bondholders Foundation and its founder, this has always been a very bipartisanly supported issue. And if you look at the Hong Kong Autonomy Act and many other issues involving China, it has been across the board bipartisanly supported. Democrats, Republicans alike know China, the Chinese Communist Party, is an existential threat to our country and to the world, and they need shut down.
You've gone on record that you're not a fan of Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary. How do you get around that and put forth your agenda?
It's very simple. He works for the President of the United States, and it simply takes the President to say, I want this done. It's very simple. I mean, we're not talking about President Mnuchin. He is the Treasury Secretary, and he works at the behest of the President for and on behalf of the American people. It's very simple.
So what are the next steps? What are you doing to make that happen?
Well, we're working with the Senate and the House in garnering support on a bipartisan joint House-Senate concurrent resolution encouraging President Trump to do the American Bondholders Foundation proposal that has been submitted to him. It doesn't even require an executive order. A presidential memorandum would suffice, or a phone call to say, Secretary Mnuchin, I want to uphold the rule of law. I am a law and order president, and the law says China has to honor its financial obligations to the American people and get this deal done. It's very simple.
So this is something that our president, President Donald J. Trump, has to do now. It cannot wait.
It cannot wait. China must be held accountable. And I can assure you, this will be the next shoe to drop. There is no legal reason whatsoever that this is not done and can't be done immediately. It's all politics, and it's the ruthless pro-China lobby pushing against it, and Wall Street firms not wanting to rock the boat with China so that they can continue to send more money of investors and American money to China. And that's what this boils down to. It's very clear in the law.
I've been watching the markets very carefully because it's my business to do so, and I see that the markets have responded favorably, in my opinion, to two things. Putin's so-called discovery of a vaccine for the coronavirus, and perhaps the new Democratic ticket featuring Kamala Harris on it. And gold doesn't like stability, so it has dropped in the last day and a half. I see a perception of everything is going to be okay after the election if Biden wins. But on the contrary, our country will be another wholly owned subsidiary of the Chinese Communist Party if that happens.
And we simply cannot allow that to happen. We have got to get tough on China. Look, right now, the American people don't even realize their pork industry, like Smithfield Foods and so many other of our critical infrastructure, is owned by the Chinese Communist Party. And the American people need to wake up and say enough is enough. America first, America only, and start pushing back on the Chinese Communist Party and their infiltration, their takeover. We've seen what they've done with their Confucius Institute and the mindset and the mind alteration to our youth. It must stop. No more socialism, no more communism, no more Chinese Communist Party. Get them out of our country, get them out of our businesses, get them out of every one of our local, city, state, and federal governments. The buck stops here. And I think with President Donald J. Trump, we're going to see that happen. He's vowed to hold them accountable, and I think that he will. I'm confident that he will. It is important to know that the entire law firm of Baker Hostetler came in behind the ABF and many, many other senior level people in D.C., reinforcing our legal position, the legal authorities. This is nothing but politics. That's all that is. And the only person right now standing in the way of making this happen is Steve Mnuchin. But think about it. He made all his money in China. He's a Goldman Sachs guy, and he made all his movies. I mean, the last movie he did, China funded $500 million for it. And so that is the holdup right there, bottom line. And so it's a matter of getting around that and the president saying, we're going to hold China accountable. Whether you like it or not, Mr. Mnuchin, here's how this has to be done. 20% of every penny collected goes to an already approved 501c3 nonprofit to benefit our law enforcement, our volunteer firefighters, our first line of defense. I testified before this in Congress in 2003, and it has to happen. We've got to hold them accountable and start taking our country back step by step and getting it back on track. I want it to be the country I grew up in, and I'm sure you grew up in.
Jonna, how do our listeners find you?
Our website is AmericanBondholdersFoundation.com. We can be found on Twitter at ABF USA or on Facebook at ABF Bondholders. But you will see some congressional support coming out in the media and on social media. And I encourage every American to reach out to the White House, to their congressional leader, and say, the buck stops here and now. Hold China accountable to the American people.
Jonna Bianco, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much for joining me today on the program.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Jonna Bianco, the president and chairwoman of the American Bondholders Foundation. The website is AmericanBondholdersFoundation.com. The Ellis Martin Report can be heard on your favorite podcast app, the Voice America Business Channel, and daily on Money Talk Radio all over South Florida. I'm Ellis Martin.
Would you like to be one of the first to see who we are following? Subscribe to our audio newsletter. It's free. EllisMartinReport.com.